Hello everyone. I would like to welcome you to another episode of the Balkan History Association webinar series. My name is Timothy French, and today we have the honor of having Dr. Ayca Baydar with us. She is a member of the Faculty of Humanities at Kastamonu University in Turkey. She also has her PhD in Near and Middle Eastern Studies from the University of London, where her thesis was The Turcophone Orthodox Christians from Coexistence to Ethno-Religious Homogenization, a study of the Karamanlitika press during the Greek-Turkish War and the population exchange. She's also the author of a book, 30 Years of Longing, Olga Vatadu's Return to Izmir in 1952, and she is the author of an article titled Fragmenting the Orthodox Communion, Language, Loyalty, and the Making of National Orthodoxy in the Late Ottoman Period, published in the Journal of Church and State. Today's presentation by Dr. Baydar is titled The Ottoman Balkans and Shared Memory, Cultural Encounters, Conflict, and the Making of Nations. This presentation explores the Ottoman Balkans as a space of shared memory shaped by centuries of cultural encounter and imperial coexistence. Within the Ottoman framework, religious affiliation and local belonging intersected in fluid and negotiated ways. The 19th and early 20th centuries, however, brought rupture through nation building, the Balkan Wars, mass displacement, wartime mobilization, and paramilitary practices. As militarization became embedded in governance, the transition from empire to nation transformed both political structures and historical consciousness. Rumelia remained central to Turkish identity as a lost homeland, while Balkan trauma fostered a defensive attitude toward Europe. This dilemma of legacy echoes the notion that war made the state and state made war. So with that, we would like to welcome Dr. Ayca Baydar. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tim, for the introduction, and thank you for the organizers for this invitation and for hosting this important series of talks about the Balkan region. It's a great honor and pleasure to be part of this event. Today, I'll talk about Ottoman Orthodoxy, focusing on a comparative analysis of the Bulgarian Exarchate and the Turkish Orthodox Church, which I think closely aligns with the thematic scope of the Balkan History Association. This research, which I co-authored with Ümit Eser, is forthcoming, as you said, and will be published in October in the Journal of Church and State. Let me share my presentation here. Yeah, I think you can see it now, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So, when we refer to Ottoman Orthodoxy, we are dealing with a broad and complex concept that includes many different dimensions. For the purpose of this talk, I'll only highlight a few key common features as background. There is also an ongoing debate about whether this system dates back to the 15th century or was largely constructed in the 19th century, but that question lies beyond the scope of my presentation. Basically, in the Ottoman Empire, non-Muslim communities were organized under the millet system, which gave them a degree of religious freedom and administrative autonomy. All Orthodox Christians, Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, Arabs, and the Turkish Orthodox populations, Turkish-speaking Orthodox populations were grouped together as simply Rum. The central authority was the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, whose head was acknowledged by the Ottoman state as both a spiritual and civil leader of Orthodoxy. In this system, not language or ethnicity, but religion defined the identity. If you were an Orthodox, you must obey the Patriarchate. Here, I'd like to share some photos. I thought images could be interesting for the audience. I took them in Bulgaria, Plovdiv. These are three gravestones from exactly the same graveyard, lying side by side, showing how diverse the Ottoman world was in the Balkans. They show how different cultures coexisted and expressed themselves through language, religion, and different scripts in the same physical space. There are some other as well. These images again taken by me from a Bulgarian monastery using these icons are using different scripts. There were various icons in one single monastery using different scripts. That's also again a diverse example of this Balkan Orthodoxy. And the last one is this one. Here, another interesting example. This is a Turkish Lord's Prayer with Greek letters, also known as Karamanlidika. So all these three scripts and languages survived all through the Balkans throughout its shared religious history. Okay, so let's move the other slide. Yes, the Greek Orthodox communities form the largest non-Muslim religious group in the empire. Both Greek and non-Greek speaking Orthodox Christians were referred to as Le Greeks in Western diplomatic correspondence, and they were called Rums in Ottoman documents, reflecting a shared confessional identity. The use of ethnicity such as Bulgarian or Serb was not evident in the early modern periods. The self-identification was simply being a member of Orthodox millet. However, as national awareness increased, the members of the Orthodox millet started wanting their own national churches. So, in the Balkans, Ottoman Orthodoxy began to fragment. The Greek, Romanian, Serbian, and Bulgarian movements were reshaped along national lines. In this context, we look at why some communities choose to create their own churches while others stay loyal to the patriarchate. We focus on four main factors: local divisions, the developments of national languages, and political crisis. Our comparison examines how this Ottoman model broke down under nationalisms and was reconfigured into competing national religious institutions. Our case example, the Bulgarian Exarchate, was the very first one separating from the Greek Patriarchate, and the Turkish Orthodox Church was the very last, the final example of this fragmentation. So, unlike the Greek and Romanian churches, which were tied to their own independent states, the Bulgarian and the Turkish church movements, they both were trying to create their own religious authority while still under the Ottoman rule. So, that was another similarity between them. During the formation of the Bulgarian Exarchate, discontent among the higher ranks of the Orthodox clergy played a key role in turning a shared ethnic identity into a national one. What started in the 1830s as local demands like lowering church taxes and appointing Bulgarian-speaking bishops gradually turned into a much bigger movement that led to a split within the Orthodox Church. This split wasn't just about religion or administration, it was also deeply political and cultural. By the 1870s, it had turned into a serious conflict between the ecumenical patriarchate and the emerging Bulgarian exarchate. On the other hand, early 20th century Turkish-speaking Orthodox communities in Anatolia had different concerns. They felt marginalized and even humiliated by the Greek-speaking church leadership. They were seen as more rural and not represented in high positions. And also, Turkish speaking Orthodox wanted to use Turkish in their religious services. Besides these demands, the Turkish-speaking communities were closely connected to everyday life in Anatolia and had strong cultural ties with their Muslim neighbors. Because of this, their identity stayed more religion-based rather than national. So, unlike the Bulgarians, they didn't develop a nationalist movement despite all these complaining. So here we see two distinct cases of intra-church conflict. One is the Balkan case, and the other one is the Anatolian case. In the meantime, Greek nationalism developed into a more secular idea. After Greek independence, the term Hellas was used to define the Greek nation as a continuation of that ancient past. The Greek language was considered crucial element of the nationhood. So all non-Greek speaking Orthodox Christians were encouraged to learn Greek and thus become a part of this nation. But in Anatolia, the linguistic situation was very mixed. Many Orthodox Christians spoke Turkish as their first language. So here, instead of excluding non-Greek speakers, they argued that these people could still become fully Greek by relearning their ancestral language. So Greek wasn't just a language, it was seen as a path to becoming part of the nation, the Greek nation. In this narrative, Turkishness was seen as backward, while Greek represented civilization. By learning Greek, the Turkish-speaking Orthodox were believed to be rescued from this backwardness and became civilized. This idea was called the Enlightenment of the Cappadocians. They were only expected to regain their ancestral language, which would eventually create a national awareness among them. So Greek nationalist groups in the second half of the 19th century aimed to unify Orthodox Christians in Anatolia by promoting Greek identity among local communities. They saw it as their mission to Hellenize Turcophone Orthodox populations. And to achieve this, they established schools and sent teachers to train in in Athens to rural Anatolia to teach Greek language and culture. Athens thought opening schools would be enough to Hellenize these non-Greek speaking communities, but it didn't work very well. This effort only had limited success from the Greek perspective. Anatolian Orthodox continued to maintain strong local identities and kept using Turkish. So here I have another. Yes, sorry. Yeah, that one. Yes, here is a famous quote of a Greek ethnologist wrote in his studies on Asia Minor in 1891. A Greek nationalist asked an Anatolian villager, "What are you?" And he simply replies as a Christian. But of course, the Greek nationalist guy was not happy with the answer and say, "All right, but other people are Christians as well, like the Armenians, the Franks, the Russians." But the villager was indifferent to him and replied, "Yes, these people believe in Christ, but I'm a Christian." The nationalists insist that perhaps you're a Greek, but again, the villager says, "No, I'm not anything. I've told you that I'm just a Christian." So the Hellenization effort did not succeed in replacing their religious identity with a national one. They were not interested in the name of their race. However, they did not try to turn Turkish into a marker of identity either, or developed a separate language-based nationalism. Turkish was their everyday language, but it was not seen as a symbol of who they were as a group, especially considering the fact that Turkish was associated with Islam and something they had never really proud of. And on top of it, after Bulgarians left the Patriarchate in the late 19th century, Greek nationalism began to define Orthodox identity less through language and more through loyalty to the ecumenical Patriarchate. So as long as they kept their loyalty to the patriarchate, they were considered Greek. So both Turkish-speaking communities themselves and also the Greek national centers overcome the problem of Turkish language by this loyalty, by replacing loyalty with language. But although they stayed loyal, there was still an ideological and cultural distance from the Greek centers as Anatolian Christians. They were closer to their Muslim neighbors more than the Greeks. And also, they had a strong local Anatolian consciousness expressed mainly through their local publishing press. So from here, I'm going to move to the second part of my presentation, and I'll try to explain how this dynamic will change with the war, 10 years of war. The Ottoman defeat in the First Balkan War in 1912 resulted in the loss of the Balkan territories of the Ottoman Empire, followed by the deportation of much of the Muslim population there. So the trauma of this Balkan disaster in the Ottoman context and the following deportation of Balkan Muslims to Anatolia shaped the political agenda of the Turkish political elites. So this led to Muslims being framed as the true citizens of the empire, while the Christians were often viewed as disloyal. The Committee of Union and Progress, called CUP, felt the urge to save their fatherland and pursue policies of Turkification to preserve the state, and these included forced population movements and economic reforms aimed reducing non-Muslim economic power. So, as a result of this polarization, Christians became increasingly alienated, while Greek Orthodox communities became more and more attached to each other. Let me move to my next slide. Yes. So by the early 20th century, especially after the election of the Venizelos Patriarch Meletios in 1921, this loyalty that I already talked in the first part of this presentation increasingly overlapped with Greek national identity. And Orthodoxy now became equal to national solidarity with Greece. So Anatolian Christians were aware that a Greek defeat meant that there wouldn't be any hope of remaining in Anatolia. So for Christians, Venizelos' victory was perceived as the only possible safeguard against displacement and ethnic violence. So Greece also portrayed itself as the protector of Orthodox Christians, arguing that winning the war would save the Anatolian Christians from persecution. This message was used both to gain support from Christians in Anatolia and to secure help from the Allied powers, especially Britain. Since Greece lacked the resources to win the war on its own, it relied heavily on British support, with the Patriarchate acting as a bridge between Greece and local Orthodox communities. So at the same time, Greek authorities used propaganda like letters, books, and images to highlight possible violence against the Anatolian Christians and attract Western sympathy. So here I shared a document that I gained from the British Archive, a letter asking help from Britain for the Anatolian Christians. At that point, Orthodox Christians in Anatolia as well supported Greece because they believed that their survival depended on a Greek victory. They had little faith in returning to peaceful life under Turkish rule. So many of them appealed to the great powers for protection, and groups like the Unredeemed Greeks committee even sent warnings, just like the one you see on the screen. This is a letter written by this unredeemed Greek committee to Britain. And here they say if Greece withdrew, Christians in Anatolia would face destruction. Newspapers and officials portrayed the war as a tragedy for Christians, warning that without foreign intervention, a Turkish victory could lead to the destruction of non-Muslim communities. So, however, towards the end of the Greek-Turkish war, it was obvious that Greece was not winning as they hoped, and the Turkish victory became more evident. So, the Turkish or speaking Orthodox, they decided to separate themselves from the Greeks. So, in this way, they would not be considered enemies of the Turkish state. So here, what we see, they use the Turkish Orthodox Church not as a religious institution, but a political body. So the engine was not the intra-church conflict, but Muslim-Christian polarization was actually the primary reason. And the Turkish Orthodox Church was a fragile product of war, showing an example of how fear reshaped a religious community into a national group in either way. So they either had to be part of the Greek nation, as in the beginning of the Greco-Turkish War, to be protected from the Turks. Or in the second half of the war, this time they claimed to be Turkish and established their own Turkish church to prove their loyalty to the Turkish authorities this time. And this situation is an example of what the political scholar Gopal Balakrishnan states: war is not just destructive, but also constructive of national structures. Here in the analytical part of my presentation, what you see on the screen is a decision chart from here I refer to the theory of Harris Milanos. He argues that states in the post-Ottoman territories, in the especially in the Balkan region, adopt different strategies for groups within their borders, depending on whether they are seen as a threat or an asset. So he identifies three main policies: assimilation, accommodation, and exclusion. And the political elites tend to select these policies against non-core groups, depending on whether they had an enemy support or not. So if a non-core group was supported by an enemy of the host state, then it was perceived as a threat and targeted by exclusionary policies. However, when they did not have enemy support, there was the uh, possibility of assimilation or accommodation. And by applying his theory, I state that the Anatolian Orthodox were seen as a part of the enemy as long as they belonged to the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, which supported Venizelist irredentist policies. The Turkish Orthodox Church, on the other hand, was founded to separate the community from the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate so that their loyalty to the Turkish state would be ensured and they would be allowed to stay in Turkey. So, in other words, the foundation of the Turkish Orthodox Church was an attempt to accommodate the Turkish Orthodox, the Turkish speaking Orthodox. So, here we can talk about selective tactics, and the whole experience of the Turkish Orthodox Church was actually a move forward, integrating this pre-national small community into the mainstream national body. There was no option for them but to deny their ties with the Greeks in order to be able to remain in Anatolia. So the motivation to separate was to be in good terms with the Turkish rulers. One more slide. Yeah. So here, I presented this timeline. If we go back to the comparison of the case of the Bulgarian Exarchate and the Turkish Orthodox Church, we can again see how different the timeline of this integration to nationalization happened far apart in the Balkan region and in Anatolia. In Anatolia, the nationalism only really took shape through war and violence. Yeah, and these two cases as the first and the last example of the intra-church conflict shows the complex interplay of language and loyalty during the final phase of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And I'd like to finish my presentation with a picture that is the community that I talked about today, the Turkish Orthodox, the Turkish-speaking Orthodox. And this is their very last picture in front of their church in Anatolia. And after this picture, they had to leave their land forever with the population exchange. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Baydar. That was very fascinating and interesting presentation. I have several questions myself. I'll see if anyone in the audience has a question, but I just wanted to start with a quick question about so the Bulgarians in the 19th century wanted their own church autonomy, and this autonomy, the exarchate, ended up leading to more of a nationalist identity. So the desire for independent religion sort of led them away from religion towards nationalism. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I know that sounds maybe confusing, but confusing, but it's exactly like how it is. In fact, religious separation was the first, and then national identity followed that. So, nation in the Balkan, especially in the Balkan region, post Ottoman land, uh, nationalism followed the national churches. So it was linguistic, ethno-linguistic church movement started their nationalism. Yeah, it's a different, I think, a unique example of becoming a national unity we see in the Balkans, in the post-Ottoman countries.
Well, then that leads me directly into another question, and I hope this isn't too counterfactual, but thinking about the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, in particular the Second Balkan War, I think of in the early 19th century when, as you said, Serbs, Bulgarians, Greeks were all Orthodox Christians living under Ottoman rule. And as they either gained independence, as Greece did, or independence within the church, as Bulgaria did, this led to nationalism, which led them to the Orthodox nations to fighting each other in 1913 then? Is that would that be true?
So if I get it correct, you say in the coming century, these all these clashes, we can take it back to the beginning, you say? Are you asking this?
Yes, I guess that nationalism arose after religion wanting religious independence. Your own church, your own Bulgarian church or Greek church, led to an independence that led to a nationalistic feeling, and the nationalistic feelings in Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, then led them into conflict with each other over national identity. Then in 1913.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's true. Until the Balkan War, they were actually like all of them were Ottomans. Yeah, I mean, if you're Orthodox, if you're an Orthodox from the Balkan region, you're part of the Ottoman Empire, and there was just one single autonomy. the Greek Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. Back in days in earlier periods, it was okay because speaking another language was not an identity. It was not defining you. You could speak Bulgarian, Serbian, or Greek. That's okay. That didn't define you. Uh, but now in the 19th century, and especially in the early 20th century, now the church authority, this Greek dominance was not okay anymore. And yes, of course, the Balkan, like this, also an actor, this ideology, an actor of the Balkan War as well, because like they were claiming the exactly same land against each other, um, and now they all have their own nation states with their own national churches.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that answer. And if anybody in the audience has a question, you can either raise your hand and we can let you speak, or you can type a question in the question and answer box at the bottom. Um, so I was also thinking, as Orthodox Christians, whether it's Bulgarians or Greeks, started identifying more as a nation, did this cause Ottoman Turks to identify more as Turkish instead of Islamic? Was there a counter nationalistic feeling in Turkey or the
Yeah,
Ottoman
that's the
Empire?
good point. Yeah, in fact, as I tried to explain in my presentation, not only the Anatolian Christian nationalism happened with the war, but also Turkish nationalism reshaped with the war as well. Because after the Balkan trauma, after the trauma of the Balkan War, Turkish nationalism became a lot more popular and also more aggressive as well. So if we apply this raw theory that this ABC steps of nationalism, Balkan War was actually the step B, because now Turkish nationalism was not an intellectual endeavor anymore and became more popular, and civilians were also part of it, getting more and more integrated into nationalism. And yes, definitely with the Balkan nationalism, Turkish nationalism also becoming, let's say, Muslim people becoming more Turkish. And this nationalism was an aggressive one because of this war and violence.
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions. I'm going to start with Mirat. Introduce yourself, please, and you can ask your question. You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I typed my question in the QA bar of the system, but I can also ask here. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. My question is,
Thanks.
you described war as a decisive turning point, but how might nationalism in Anatolia have evolved in the absence of the Balkan Wars and the First World War?
Okay. World War One. Um, yeah, I mean, to be honest, as I just tried to explain, if it wasn't war, it wouldn't have been that violent, first of all, during the World War One, because World War One was just right after the Balkan Wars, and this trauma of this surviving existentialist crisis was so strong, and the pressure was just so, it felt so deeply. Uh, during World War One, and then of course the following Greco-Turkish War, it was a lot more. There was a lot more violence between these different groups, between and this the polarization through the polarization followed the religious line. So it was between the Muslims and the Christians, basically the Turks and the Greeks, the Anatolian Greeks. So if it wasn't the war, it wouldn't have been that violent, definitely for sure. And also, I think, as Tim asked, they probably wouldn't call themselves Turks or Greeks. They would say it as Muslims and Christians.
Thank you for that question. Appreciate it. Um, I thought I saw another hand up. I'll see if it comes back up. Um, so there were Ottoman or there were Turkish speaking Christians in Anatolia, which you said asked the world powers to intervene. They became part of the Turkish Orthodox Church. What what happened to them? Are they there's still a few in number, aren't they? Did they
Yeah,
eventually leave or did they?
yeah. Well, unfortunately, they did. They left with the population exchange. Long story short, yes, it survived today, the church, the Turkish Orthodox Church, but it's just a name. I mean, that's just a name, and it was not really. It did first of all, the subject of this church left Anatolia, so there was no audience for the church itself, and plus, the support was mainly because of this, protection instinct, this safety thing. When the war was over, I mean, there was no reason to continue to support it. Of course, the leader Papa Eftim and his close circle kept supporting it, and they also needed to had good terms with the Turkish authorities as well in Turkey too. But it was such a small community. I mean, basically just Papa Eftim and his small family circle, let's say. But yeah, the Turkish Orthodox Church was still today in Istanbul, though without any, you know, members.
Thank you for that answer. So okay, we have another question here. Uh, Go ahead, Murat.
Okay, thank you. Uh, in in examining the origins of this Turkish Orthodox Church, I mean, how decisive were the effects of war compared to other social, political, or religious factors?
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, how effective it was if we go through the question how effective and how much effect it had during the war. In fact, I mean, it didn't save the community to be included in the population exchange. So we can say that even the Turkish authorities, they were not convinced with this movement, with this church. Despite that, in fact, I mean, it was a state-sponsored, state, yeah, we can say it a state-sponsored project. But even then, it wasn't that effective because in the last minute in Lausanne Agreement, they were these Turkish-speaking Christians. They were also included in the population exchange, and unfortunately, they had to leave as well, just like the other Greek-speaking Orthodox in Istanbul and in other coastal cities. So yeah, I mean, we can say that this move was not really, um, it didn't change much, we can say, yes.
Mm, Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions, then I guess we will wrap this up. It was, again, a very, very interesting, very fascinating presentation and your research. There are still implications today for what are in your findings with what's going on in the world. Dr. Baydar, did you have any closing comments you would like to make?
Again, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here in your platform, talking about Turkish-speaking Orthodox Christians and the Bulgarian case. It's really meaningful because it's just the place to talk about such things, Balkan History Association. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. And we'd like to thank Dr. Baydar for her presentation and thank Dr. Dragnia for putting this together with the Balkan History Association. If anyone is interested in joining that group, you can do a search online and find Balkan History Association and you can become a member. So thank you all for attending and thank you for your presentation, Dr. Baydar. And until next time, we will see you online. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you too. Bye.